Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's New Capital webinar, From Partisan Politics to Proactive Planning and Portfolios. I'm Catherine Varr, and I'm joined by Daisy, who she's helping us host the webinar, and she's going to be reading our regulatory disclosures in just a moment. So thank you for being here. And as always, if you all have questions during the webinar, feel free to use the Q&A tool. You can chat with us using the chat tool, so feel free to use those tools as needed. And also, we are going to go ahead and do a poll for this webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that now. Now I will turn it over to Daisy to read the regulatory disclosures.
This New Capital presentation is being made available for educational purposes only and should not be used for any other purpose. The information presented does not constitute and should not be construed as an offering of advisory services or an offer to sell or solicitation to buy any securities, related financial instruments, financial services, or other services in any jurisdiction. Past investment performance is not an indication of future results. Wherever there is a potential for profit, there is also the possibility of loss. Certain information contained herein concerning economic trends and performance is based on or derived from information provided by independent third-party sources. New Capital believes that the sources from which such information have been obtained are reliable. However, we cannot guarantee the accuracy of such information and have not independently audited these sources.
Thank you, Daisy. And now we'll bring Leonard in to get started and look at those poll results.
And look at my family.
And your family there, and the Tillamook factory.
This slide is titled Life Goes On. And during these incredibly tumultuous times, I think it's important that everybody recognize that and everybody take steps to live their authentic lives. That, after all, is what our goal is here at New Capital. This is what we, more than anything, are devoted to on a daily basis and in every single client relationship. It's the thing that motivates us, is to help get you to happy times like this, like you see in the slide here. Our family visited Oregon recently. Just a few days ago, we had Hannah, my wife, is from Portland, Oregon, and there was a family wedding, and we took some time to go out to the Oregon coast and stopped at the incredible Tillamook cheese and ice cream factory, which is like the Disneyland of cheese and ice cream. And we took that photo. So I want to emphasize to everybody that life does go on, and it's very important during these really stressful, difficult times that we all try to live our best lives. If we can help you do that, and many of you tell us that we can help, and invite us to help, then we want to do that. Whether that's helping you with financial planning or any particular transaction, we're having lots of client meetings these days because clients are making changes, quite frankly. People are making changes to where they live, or adding a place, an additional place to live, or making job changes, or deciding to retire, or deciding to make job changes. It's a very, very fertile time for change of a personal nature. I was born in 1965, and I think we're at the very beginning of a period that's going to look like that, when lots of people made changes. Some people dropped in, some people dropped out. I think we're at the beginning phases of that. It's not going to look exactly the same, but it's going to have some similarities. And that was a similar period where people, as they discovered new ideas and new music and new places, uh, made the decision to make changes. The difference is back in those days, there weren't financial advisors like New Capital. There weren't fiduciary financial advisors with super duper financial planning software and super duper financial planners like JC Smalley and so on. Uh, our industry really had not been born at that point, but we have been now, and we're here and here to help. And so if you are thinking of changes, and you may well be, because we're doing a lot of work helping people with house sales and house purchases and portfolio changes and job changes, then we'll be happy to help. Okay, what's next? Do we do the poll results next, Catherine? I'm probably going to need some help.
Yeah, I'll jump back in. We've got about 82% participation. So
Good
I'm gonna
enough
go
for
ahead.
me.
I'm gonna end that and share the results. So
Okay.
everyone should be able to see that.
Hopefully everybody, I can see it. Have you experienced immigration enforcement loss of labor? Yet, I should have said. Yes, only 1 out of 24. 23 out of 24 say no. Our household has. Our housekeeper went to visit some family in Mexico and could not get a visa to come back into the country. Um, and so we have experienced that. I expect to see much more of it. We'll be talking about the new One Big Beautiful Bill Act, also known as OBBBA. And I think most of you probably know that there's an enormous increase in the budget for immigration enforcement. Number two, are you surprised by your portfolio performance? 65% of you said, yes, it's more than I expected. Um, Only one of you said, yes, it's less than I expected. So sorry about that. We can talk about it. And 7 of you say no, but most of you say, yeah, it's done better than I expected it had. We're hearing that a lot in a lot of meetings when we give clients their performance reports. They're like, wow, given all the headline news that we're seeing and all the volatility that we have seen, at least back in the first quarter, um, that the numbers look better than people thought they would. Number 3, my portfolio's international exposure is 21% of you said too low, 79% of you say just right, and none of you say it's too high. We'll be talking about this topic. Number 4, what political scenario lies ahead for the U.S.? 15% see democracy reform in the future. 10% of you see more of the same, of what we have now, whatever you want to call it. And a whopping 75% of you see that greater authoritarianism is on the horizon for the United States of America. 5, have or will federal budget cuts affect you? 0% say yes, positively, they will affect or have affected. 58% of you say that yes, budget cuts to the federal government will have negative impacts on you. 42% of you say no impact that you expect from federal budget cuts. And then number 6, will the new tax law affect you? 38% of you say yes, it will positively affect you. 19% of you, 3 of you say yes, it will negatively affect you. 44% of you, the largest number of you, said no, you don't see that it's going to affect you. So thank you very much for those comments. That helps us understand what you're thinking, where you're at, and so forth. Okay. Catherine, you want to rejoin me here because we're going to move into a phase of talking about some housekeeping types of stuff. Our annual conference is on October 29th, Wednesday. We're moving it to a Wednesday. Today's a Wednesday, so we're having this webinar on a Wednesday. And basically, Catherine and I did a chat GPT recently and said, what's the best day to do a business thing? Because we've generally been holding things on Thursday or Friday, and it came back and it suggested Wednesday. So we've entered the AI age, letting AI suggest to us when to hold conferences. Um, Catherine, anything to add here? It's going to be at the other building
If
where
you
we've
guys,
been holding it the past few years.
yeah, if you've attended before, no change as far as the venue. Of course, you can attend in person, and we welcome that. And if you do that, you get lunch. Also, virtual attendance for anyone not in Houston, or if you don't want to leave the house that day, that's fine too. And also just saying that, this event is for New Capital clients and guests. So if there's anyone that you think, especially considering maybe the presentation topics we're going to be covering, if you feel like there's anything that someone in your life would find valuable, then we're happy to have them join us as well. And then, the highlights kind of our tentative agenda that we're working on. Of course, as usual, market insights from Leonard, economic updates, our ever famous or infamous What's New at New Capital, just talking about what we're doing new and have kind of been working on
I
this
hope not infamous.
last year. And that includes, a lot of NCM 360 enhancements. So we'll talk
Yeah.
about a little bit of that today as well. But and then also we're excited to do an elder care planning guidance. So this will be kind of our planning section, and we'll have someone join us from Live Well, which is an organization we've talked to that works with elder care patients.
These are outside experts who provide assistance to families about where to live, what options are available, and they go well beyond that too to talk about healthcare and issues that are generally related to elder care. They're experts in it. They have professional caregivers, and what an important topic this is for everybody. And so we look forward to having them. Okay, now we have some big NCM 360 updates that we want to take a little time to go through. And here's the first.
So I can jump into this.
Yeah, please.
We are very excited because MFA is something we've wanted for a long time.
That is multi-factor authentication.
Yep.
You all
Multi-factor.
probably know it when you log into a lot of systems now. It'll send you a number, six-digit number or something to get into the site. And so we're adding that. It's already enabled, but we're rolling it out. Okay, go on, Catherine.
Yep. So rollout's going to start on August 1st. There should be a communication coming out along with that. So for those of you who regularly log into NCM 360, you'll know what to expect, but it's a very easy setup. We internally, firm users have already done it, and it's just momentarily, it just takes a few moments. It does require an authenticator app. A lot of people hopefully are already used to using these. Anytime you're logging into most secure platforms now, you're having to do this. And so if you already have an authenticator app, you can use that same one for NCM 360. If you don't yet have one, we are recommending just kind of the highest use, most popular, easiest, straightforward ones, which is Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, and then Twilio Authy. Twilio, yeah, so those are kind of the most straightforward. And what these apps do when you're doing a setup, you see the little QR code. You'll just scan that in the app. It connects you to the NCM 360 setup. And then every time you log in after that, you'll just put in a 6-digit code that comes off of your phone. Leonard's showing you right now on Authenticator. So it says NCM 360, it gives you a 6-digit code, and then you get to log in.
And you see that code is changing. So to be clear, our system is not going to send you a text message.
Mhm.
That's just not how it's designed. And so the other way is that you have this app on your phone, and when you log into NCM 360, you'll go to Google Authenticator as in this case, or Microsoft, or you may already have an authenticator. There are lots of them,
Hmm.
and you can see that 887, see, and it just changed every 30 seconds. So there's the 6-digit code that you're going to need to put in. So um, to prepare for this, go ahead. If you don't have an authenticator, go ahead, and we would recommend downloading one of these three. If you're a Google user and use Google Sheets and so
Hmm.
on, then it probably makes sense to use the Google product. If you're a Microsoft user, does Apple have one? They must, maybe.
I mean, I think on your phone, Apple Passwords also will do this. So
Okay.
there's a lot of flexibility. You're very likely using this if you're logging into Fidelity. Hopefully, you're using it. A lot of these platforms started with it being optional, and everyone's moving to it being mandatory. It's just the way it's going. The concept here is two-factor authentication. So you have to know your password. And just in case your password gets compromised, you also have to have your phone. So no one can log into your NCM 360 without your cell phone and
Your
your
password.
password. Yeah. So we're
Okay,
excited to
next.
launch that. Yep.
All right.
Next, we have started doing a lot of messaging coming out of NCM 360, and we are excited that those will now start including SMS text messages. Um, First comment is we're not going to inundate you. We're not going to, it's not going to be all the time, all day, every day. We want to make sure it's the most important things that we can send to you. So those will include personal reminders. So that's reminders based on your own data. Also, we'll let you know when new reports are available, important updates from coming from New Capital and about NCM 360, and then of course anything that's like an invitation to an event, another webinar, the conference, things like that. So, and the goal here is one centralized channel for communication on SMS. It's kind of neat. Leonard and I have done a lot of testing, and it's kind of neat because if you save the number that you're receiving SMS in your phone, you'll have one long feed of everything coming from NCM 360. So all of our communications will be in one channel. You can scroll back through and get to what you need. And then also, if you do want to manage your preferences, you'll be able to do that in NCM 360 as well.
Yeah, so this is good, and our system is already sending um, financial planning recommendations. For example, you may get a notice here that says you have another week until the deadline for making an IRA contribution, or you have only a few days before the end of the year, and would you like to make a contribution to your charitable donor advised fund? Or you have a corporate tax return that is due, partnership tax return that's due in a week. Now, you may know these things, but they're also going to be programmed into NCM 360 and remind you. And so these, with your SMS feed, you will be able to go back through all of the things coming, critical things coming from New Capital, and be able to review whether you need to take action on those things or not. Okay, next, the dashboard.
Yeah, this is something we're very excited about. This will be what when you log into NCM 360, you're going to see something different. And what we're hoping to do here is provide widgets. So widgets of different information, basically little tools that you can see data of one type and all in one spot, and then also be able to use that to navigate to those areas as well. We still will have our menu, but for example, if you are, and this is not a dynamic screen, but if you are looking at reports and you want to open your most recent reports, you can do that right from the homepage. If you want to go and see all of your reports, you'll be able to do that as well because this top header will be a link to that section. So our focus is, obviously we want it to be more modern and cleaned up and as useful as possible. So navigation, and then also to be able to see your data, the most important data, right when you log in and be able to get to where you need to go.
And we'll have portfolio data for you there, accounts data, and this will work on both the desktop and the mobile
Yes.
equally fine.
Yes.
Okay, why don't I take this one? This
Yeah.
is NCM 360 and AI. Um, we have been working with AI in our office for at least a year. And recently we have built AI, or the capability for AI, I should say, into NCM 360. We have linked up NCM 360 with AI, artificial intelligence, and it's going to allow us to do some really nifty things. For example, we can analyze your tax return and see, are there opportunities to improve your tax position? We can analyze your estate documents and analyze, are there things that we might want to take a look at doing there, and what is the current state of your planning. We can look at insurance policies and have it determine whether uh, changes should be made, policy should be retained, or maybe rolled over to another policy, or even rolled over to a different instrument like a variable annuity. We can even do portfolio analysis. We can do a life checkup history and have it look at all the checkups that you've taken in the past when you've come to meet with us, and give an overall appraisal of how you are doing financially in your own view versus when you began to work with us. Often what we see is significant improvement in people's self ratings. So that is it. It is here. We're already using AI within NCM 360 for some things, but we just want you to know that these very positive benefits are on their way in the system, and we hope it will give you yet another reason to want to work with the system. Okay, this is a slide showing AI. This is from JP Morgan, and it's showing this huge ramping growth. You may all have seen that we recently added NVIDIA to your portfolios, and this is the reason. And here you can see that in finance and insurance, to date, 14% of finance and insurance businesses are reporting use of AI to produce their goods and services. So we're in this 14% here. New Capital is. We never want to be last to do anything that's this important. But eventually this is going to reach 100%, all these different businesses. Just wanted to show everybody kind of where we are in this tremendous revolution that is going on in the world of computing. Okay, now the main part of the presentation. And I'm going to bring JC in for this. We're going to talk a little bit about what this new law brings us on the financial planning front. It's going to bring a lot of things in different businesses and for corporate law, JC, and it's going to do certain things for certain industries, always the agriculture business and the energy business. And of course, I think many people are familiar that it's actually going to hurt quite a number of businesses that are working in clean energy and those types of areas. But we're focused here today on what does it mean for financial planning aspects. So let me turn it over to you on this one.
Thank you, Leonard, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, so many of you have probably been following this over the past several weeks. And so we wanted to bring to your attention some of the most wide-reaching changes that will affect most or some of you. First being the extension of the lower federal income tax rates and higher standard deductions that we've been used to through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was set to expire at the end of this year. So this new law in the past less than 2 weeks has extended those lower rates and standard deductions, and will continue to increase with inflation adjustments each year. We have a new age 65 and older bonus deduction. So that's going to be $6,000 per person, and that will be through 2028. And that was a compromise for the no tax on Social Security. So whether you're taking Social Security or not, age 65 or older individuals will receive this additional deduction. There are some phase outs to note here below: 75,000 for single filers, 150 for joint filers. The state and local tax deductions increased from the 10,000 cap that we've been used to over the past few years to now 40,000. That will go through 2029. And there is another threshold AGI over 500,000 still remains at the 10,000. So those below the 500,000 AGI will get the increased 40,000 deduction for property tax. Most of you are in Texas, so we don't get the state tax deduction.
So, JC, this really undid what Donald Trump did in the first
Exactly.
term when they put this limit on,
Mhm.
and and so this takes it off. So this would be a provision that will be very good for those clients of ours who own their homes
Yes, exactly.
and maybe own them in Houston, where we have relatively high property taxes. This is going to, I mean, $40,000. Now, does this include interest on mortgages as well, or is it only property tax?
No, I believe that one is separate.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So it's really just property tax, but for most people with a home under $3 million or $2 million or something like
They
that,
get the full,
they'll be
the
able to take the full deduction.
right, exactly.
Okay, all right, got it.
The estate tax exemption remains this year just under 14 million per person, but it will increase quite a big jump next year to 15 million per person, 30 million for a couple. Um,
And will it stay indexed? I'm assuming they kept the indexing.
Correct. Yes, it
Okay,
will.
so it'll go up from there.
Yes.
Okay.
There are some new 529, what used to be called 529 college savings plans. They're more 529 education savings plans now because they've been expanded to a couple different areas. So, for example, post-secondary expenses, which would be professional certifications, licenses can now be used from funds from these accounts. And as well as expenses for K through 12 private, public school, any related expenses such as tutoring, supplies has been increased to 20,000 per year per beneficiary. So that is an increase from the 10,000 that came about a couple of years ago as well.
So the bottom line, though, is that people need to work closely with us to see whether 529 plans that either exist or don't exist, but could be useful to them beyond just payment for college.
Correct. Yes, certainly.
Yep. Okay.
And then the last one here we have on the slide is a couple of charitable deduction changes. So there is a new, and this one's a little confusing, it's a 0.5% of AGI floor for itemizers. So for example, let's say there's a household with $100,000 AGI. The first 0.5% of charitable deductions is excluded for itemizers. Now, it's not a huge number, so $100,000 household income would be subject to a $500 floor that they're not able to deduct that year. So it would really affect very high income households. So it's really nuanced. It's kind of strange to me, but that is something that is new in this bill here, or this law now. And then the other thing to note is the extension of the non-itemized charitable deduction. So if you don't itemize, you can still elect this 1,000 for a single filer or 2,000 joint filer deduction, and you don't have to itemize to get those.
So on that first bullet point, the 0.5%,
Mhm.
I think what I hear you saying is that it's not so much that it's going to invalidate the potent tax benefits that come from charitable giving.
Right, right.
It's going to trim it a little bit, but it's not going to have any sort of large significant effect on people who are making charitable deductions and itemizing their taxes and getting significant tax reduction benefits from being charitable.
Exactly. And we have a lot of charitable clients. So, just no surprises if you get a little haircut on your deduction this year going forward.
But
Um,
it's a trim. It's not a buzz
yeah,
cut.
not at all.
Okay. All right.
Um, And undoubtedly, there will be more items to note going forward. This was released or passed just less than 2 weeks ago. So everyone's still digesting all the changes. But those are some of the highlights that we wanted to bring to your attention today. And just some of the tax planning implications that you might want to consider based on this bill act. Um, you might want to review your W-4 estimated and other tax withholdings. You might want to reconsider itemizing versus taking the standard deduction. As always, want to review estate, legacy, and other charitable plans. Rethink 529 account uses, which we just mentioned, and also review Roth conversions as well. We'll have a few years of lower income tax rates, so there could be some people that would be beneficial for.
And we can help with any of this, and our new AI capabilities might even come into play here, where we can look at your tax return and look at it in light of this new law, and our NCM 360 system, now supercharged with AI built into it, could offer some insights in relation to this new tax law.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And you'll be back with me when we talk about portfolios. I'm going to turn now to a sort of current overview. There's so much going on. This wasn't a very easy quarterly webinar for me to prepare for. I sort of struggled to make sense of what's going on. So you'll have to forgive me if it's not as flowing as I would like it to be, but I've done the best I can. We'll start with taking a look at the S&P 500 intra-year declines. Most of the data today is as of June 30th, which is now 2 weeks ago. But I wanted to take it from the end of the second quarter. And here we are in 2025. It may be hard to remember now, but we were down on the S&P 500 almost 20%, 19% back in the first quarter. And around the time that we had our first webinar of the year, Q1, this is about where we were. And we had a lot of people. We got a lot of people on the webinar today, but there were a lot of people on that webinar because people were not panicking. They were not. Our clients don't panic. That's the truth. I don't think I've ever had a client panic. But, people were worried and concerned, largely driven at that time by the tariffs that had been announced, and that turned out to be far more extensive than anybody had imagined. And of course, we're now back sort of pretty much in that space again, but the market was surprised at what the Trump administration came out with, and this is where we were. Where are we now? We're now up 5% on the S&P 500 year to date. That's at the end of the quarter. Again, not through today. Whatever's gone on in the last 2 weeks is not included in these slides. Have to draw the line somewhere, and this is a Q2 review, so that's where we've drawn the line, the end of Q2. So the S&P 500 up 5% year to date. It's not too bad, right? I mean, halfway through the year, 5% first year. If you got 5% in the second half of the year, it's 10%. That is the average annual return of the S&P 500, dating back to 1920s. Okay, so we've had a 25% turnaround from this minus 20%. I think you all know that. We had a huge dip down and then back up in a pretty wild ride that in many ways was reminiscent of the COVID March 2020 action in the market, when everything just went off a cliff in March of 2020 and then roared back in April of 2020. It's had really the same sort of look to it as that. And it is just one more episode that should reinforce for everybody, why we don't and should not react strongly and impulsively to movements in financial markets. Because if you had said, I don't like these tariffs, sell my entire equity portfolio, you would have missed a 25% rebound. So here at New Capital, we don't do that. We put together a portfolio for you that's the right one for you, and the one that we think is going to get you through your goals over the long term, so that we don't um, react impulsively to market movements. And as you can see, and this slide demonstrates so well, and I show this every time we do a webinar, pretty much you can count on the stock market being down some at least just about every single year. You can see every year, and on some years, very significantly down, 49% in 2008 and minus 34% in 2020. And, in almost any given year, the market will experience some period of down. But at the same time, you can see that most years ended in the positive. So if you can't take any down at all in the stock market, then you can't own stocks. Where are we? You can see here's this, look how steep this steep down and steep up. It looks a lot like right here. It's overshadowed by this green. This is COVID, steep down and steep up, right? It looks almost the same. And it's March here, and here we are, and we are now have rebounded from there up to here, there up to here, and the S&P is now trading at 22 times forward earnings. Not cheap, not cheap. And you can see, given other peaks that are highlighted here, March of 2000 and October of 2007, which began the bull market that culminated in the great financial crisis, and 2020 COVID right here. This was the peak before the drawdown in March, and then January of 2022 before we had interest rate increases. You can see that we're on the expensive side, like these other periods, second most expensive side in terms of PE ratio. Dividend yield is roughly the same on all these, but the 10-year Treasury bonds at 4.2%, unlike 2020, unlike 2022, more like 2007, and less than it was in 2000. So we are back to being on the expensive side of the American stock market. You can see that here as well. One standard deviation. This is a 30-year average. 17 times earnings is the 30-year average. One standard deviation, that is to say, observations that fall within 68%, in this case 34% to the upside, of all observations, assuming that the probability distribution is a normal probability distribution. Sorry to get technical, but that's what one standard deviation means. We're above that, 22 times earnings on the price to earnings ratio. And so I just want everybody to understand that this quick rebound and the recent all-time high records that have been set leave us with an expensive market. It doesn't mean that it's an uninvestable market. It doesn't mean that we should sell everything. No, it just means that everybody should have that expectation that a more expensive market means that going forward returns may be more muted. Here is the Treasury yield curve. This is the state of the Treasury bond market, a proxy for where interest rates are. And this is where we are right now. This dark blue is where we are, and you can see that it's unusual. It's not upward sloping in this section of it. It's downward sloping here, from here down to here, and only when we get to the 3-year Treasury bond do we begin to get a normal upward sloping Treasury curve. Why is that what we'd call normal? Because it means that you're getting paid a higher interest rate to buy a longer term bond, which makes sense, right? If I'm going to loan money, which is what a bond is, to the US government, then I would expect to get paid more. But it's not the case here, because very short term bonds are yielding higher amounts than 1, 2, or 3 years. And if you looked at the financial news or the political news this morning, you would see that a massive fight is brewing between the administration, between the president and the head of the Federal Reserve, chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, who the president um, incredibly uh, attacks in an ad hominem way on a daily basis, calling him horrible and terrible. And the way, I don't even know what the words are, but I mean, this is inconceivable in American history, and yet it's going on a daily basis. And I don't think there's any doubt that Donald Trump is going to fire Jerome Powell. And I can't tell you what the markets are going to do in reaction to it. But I don't think there's any doubt. I think it's unquestioned that that's the case. And they're already creating these pretexts that the renovation of the Federal Reserve's headquarters, that there was some, I don't know, some skullduggery about I don't know, the carpet, you know, cho choice of the carpet color or something, that the Federal Reserve hid that or something. And that's going to be why the chairman of the Federal Reserve, because Donald Trump wants these short-term interest rates to be way down here, not up here. Okay. Uncertainty. This is the policy uncertainty index, and you can see how high it jumped up when Donald Trump took office and has been in office. I think this was around the tariffs. And you can see we remain in an elevated state. This uncertainty index basically measures, I think it's internet mentions of the words economic uncertainty. So it's sort of a aggregation of mentions, and going back to 1986. But you can see that we are at highs that resemble those of 2020 and COVID, and 2008. Is both of these exceed the current levels of uncertainty, but not by a lot. Maybe this one by a significant amount. So we are right now, and this is current up to the date, facing levels of uncertainty that we've only seen a couple of other times since this particular index has been tracked. We've had a period in Q2 of ongoing executive actions, judicial actions, and what we might call, other than the passage of the bill, legislative inaction uh, in the face of executive actions that, on the face of it, would seem to encroach on legislative constitutional rights. For example, tariffs themselves are defined as Congress's domain in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, as is the right to declare war. And we could have a debate about whether bombing whether you think that was a good idea or not, but whether bombing and sending an entire fleet of bombers and support aircraft and personnel and aircraft carriers to bomb a country of 100 million or more people, the country of Iran, and its military sites and nuclear sites. We could debate or have a discussion about, is that good, is that not good, but it seems hard to argue that it's an act of war. And yet, as we've seen so often since the 1960s, or really even prior, presidents now seem to declare war rather than, where that right has been established in the Constitution explicitly, that is a right in Article 1, Section 8 that is reserved for Congress. And yet, time and time again, including just a few weeks ago, Congress, which is controlled by the president's party right now, seems to say that no, we're not going to have anything to say about that. Federal agencies and the dismissal of so many hired and working for federal agencies, which began with USAID, but is now continuing at the Department of Education and EPA and so many other agencies that were created by Congress and then given to the executive branch to operate those branches and those agencies. The executive, the president, has has eviscerated many of these agencies and even stated their intent is to shut them down. Explicitly said this is the intent, and yet Congress has so far stood by as that has occurred because they uh, politically agree in the majority, both in the House and the Senate, with the actions, and yet in the process are not requiring any sort of congressional approval for what is happening. And then we have now had a Supreme Court which appears to be empowering even further the executive. I'm not a lawyer, much less a constitutional lawyer, but my understanding of the recent ruling by the Supreme Court that lower court judges do not have the ability to bind the nation with a universal injunction, that they are only hearing a case and judging the impact on the plaintiffs who appear before them, but they cannot bind anything more than their jurisdiction. And the implication, my understanding of that, is that the executive branch of the United States can do what it wants in different jurisdictions, and there is no ability for any judicial body or judge to stop it except the Supreme Court. And that could go on months, if not years, if not decades, before the Supreme Court steps in and makes a ruling. And so we're kind of in uncharted territory here. And the U.S. presidency continues to accumulate more and more and more power. And then, of course, recently, just the other day, the firings of large amounts of employees from federal agencies has been blessed by the Supreme Court. It may be that eventually, as those firings are prosecuted, they make their way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rules on the merits of this particular firing and says, no, this was wrong. But of course, by that point, there may be no Department of Education. So that is the political backdrop that we are in. Just a couple of notes on anti-growth measures that are in the new OBA law. Medical care, especially in the form of Medicaid, we may well see reduced spending in medical care for people in need. Reduced immigration, although we're going to see an enormous increase in immigration law enforcement. And so the picture there is we're going to be taking people who I think most people agree are productively working here, even if they're not legally documented, and we're going to imprison them. And so we're going to take people who are productive, and we're going to incarcerate them. And it's hard to see that that's going to have any effect other than it's going to make us a less productive country. And then, of course, the gutting of many of the provisions that had been put into previous legislation that provided subsidies for electric cars, solar panels on roofs, and so on, basically has been gutted. So those incentives, which have been high growth incentives, and which many places, if not almost all places in other parts of the world, are rushing to get to, the United States is now going to not. Federal funding. I just wanted to show this slide to show people this is the deficit. These are the sources of financing for the federal government, and of course, this new law is going to increase. Projections are that it's going to increase the budget deficit, and we can see that income taxes $2.6 trillion, 1.7 in payroll taxes, corporate taxes $524 billion. And the deficit now has to be financed. This is interest on the deficit. $1.8 trillion in interest payments on the deficit, with a debt that's now approaching $30 trillion. So this is the $1.8 trillion in interest that gets paid on bonds. And this, of course, is how the money is spent. And you can see that net interest is right there. Okay. I talked about immigration a little bit, just made a slide here. I think the estimate is that the ICE budget is going to be 13 times what it has been, and that ICE, which didn't even exist prior to 9/11 and was intended to be an agency that was in response to Islamic terrorist attacks, There were warnings at the time that this agency could morph into something different, and it indeed has. Not only is it morphed into something different, it is now by far the largest law enforcement agency in the United States, more than the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and so on. There are going to be economic considerations as immigration is shut down and those who are working here are incarcerated or shipped out. There is a concept called money velocity. So I mentioned our housekeeper cannot get back into the country, and we haven't replaced our housekeeper, and so that dollar and those dollars that we would have spent with our housekeeper would have taken and gone to HEB and done all the things that she does with it, and HEB would have taken that same dollar and then done something with it. And so dollars flow like dominoes through the economy, and economists have a concept called money velocity. It's an actual mathematical equation, and it contributes to the growth of an economy. And you can just understand that if that dollar sits in your bank account rather than going to somebody else, then that's going to slow the economy and growth of the economy. There are going to be humanitarian concerns. We are already seeing humanitarian concerns in so many places. City of Los Angeles, undoubtedly it's coming to our city of Houston if it's not already here. And of course, there's anecdotal discussions that people are having about crops that are rotting in the field, strawberries not getting picked in California. I just gave you mine that our housekeeper is gone, and so on. And these anecdotal discussions are going to increase. This is a picture of immigration from J.P. Morgan, and it shows the breakdown in the past between foreign-born and native-born labor force growth. What contributes to labor force growth? And you can see that both do. Both foreign-born in blue and in gray, native-born people all contribute. In 2020, of course, this was COVID when we lost jobs and had job contraction, but other years mostly growth. And you can see that in many cases in 2023, all the growth was from foreign-born people. 50-50 in 2021, and that's sort of the usual. But you see that immigration is an important driver of the labor force. I think most of us know that. And so we're in uncharted waters as we essentially, as a country, reverse that process. Into tariffs now, and we're going to run long today, everybody. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully you can stick with us. We're going to talk about portfolios in just a second, just a few more slides on the macro. This was the original. This is tariffs, and everybody can see that tariffs since this is 1900. Okay, so this is going back to 1900. This is not 2000, right? The year 2000 is right here. But you can see that tariffs have waxed and waned, but in general, the trend is down from 1800, and the current president wants to return us to a period making us great again, and that period is going to look more like 1900. This was the original proposal, the effective tariff rate. Things have been walked back. And maybe now the effective tariff rate, assuming no change in imports as of June 30th, as opposed to April 8th. This president has cut it in half, what the estimates are, but, we're now getting estimates and threats of 30% and 50% tariffs against Canada, and 25% tariffs and Mexico, and even Indonesia, and 19%. The numbers are getting to be quite big again, and moving up back toward 30%. And so everybody's wondering, does the president want deals or does the president want tariffs? We don't really know what this president wants, deals or tariffs. But I think the indication right now may be that he wants tariffs, not deals. And there's risk to our markets in that. Just to remind everybody, I've shown this slide before. What are we talking about with regard to a trade deficit? Well, what we're talking about is that the U.S. exports $3 trillion. And remember, our GDP is about 28 trillion. Let's just call it 330 trillion, just to for purposes of estimation. So 10% of our GDP, $3 trillion of our 30 trillion in GDP are exports, right? And 4 trillion are imports. So we import 1 trillion more dollars than we export. Okay? So 1 trillion out of a $30 trillion economy is a trade deficit. I'm not saying that's not important, but boy, we sure are we sure are going to the wall over $1 trillion out of a $30 trillion GDP, and we export 3 trillion and import 4 trillion. A lot of economists would say there's nothing wrong with that. You're the United States of America, and so a lot of people would like to ship to you because you guys can afford to buy it and live better lives because you can get things from Amazon and you can get good cars and a big selection of things. And you can see this here, that here are the components of gross domestic product. 4% of GDP is related to housing. Investment, excluding housing, 4.6%, might be machinery and factories and things. 10.8%, state and local government spending. Federal government spending actually is a component of GDP. So if we reduce federal government spending, we actually end up reducing GDP, all things else equal. And then 68.3% of our gross domestic product is consumption. Here are net exports. Here's the $1 trillion I was telling you about, right? And so we're in a national conniption about this little purple sliver. I gave these slides in the Q1 presentation, but I like to remind everybody, right? You can't hear this information enough. I'm going to skip this slide because we're running, this is countries, individual countries and tariff effects. And then this is just to remind everybody that tariffs don't hit all industries equally. And this is why we diversify you so broadly the way we do. Look, right? Here's utilities, and here's real estate, and here's financials and healthcare, much less susceptible to counter tariffs, to countries retaliating against our industries, which is absolutely going to happen if we see 30% and so on tariffs, versus technology, materials, communication services. So this slide is to show you why a diversified portfolio right now in a time of tariffs is helpful. It doesn't mean that we don't hold technology in your portfolio. Certainly we do in very large amounts, but we want you to hold different industries too, because that's a defensive mechanism against the current tariff, pro-tariff environment. Okay. We have conflict here in the United States now. We have conflict against foreign nations. We have conflict against the undocumented workers. Tariffs. Warren Buffett himself has said that tariffs are a form of war. These are his words. That's his word. I'm not putting that word in his mouth. He said it. It's a kind of a form of war. So the U.S. is at war, if you will, against foreign nations, including allies like Canada and Mexico. Conflict or wars against university and foreign students, and of course against the federal government and scientists. I have no idea how all this warfare is going to turn out, but that's where we're at. But I can tell you that there are steps that I think people should consider. We've been talking about these different things that we can help you with, and for this presentation, I've now broken it into level 1 actions, level 2 actions, and level 3 actions. We globally diversify you, right? We do that for you. I think everyone should make sure that their personal documentation is in order. I think that everyone should be able to prove that you are born in this country, that you are a citizen of this country, and that you have both the physical documents, but that you also save those documents and be able to produce them, a digital copy at least. And we're happy to store them for you on NCM 360, where we work very hard on data security. We have a feature called Wallet. And if you want to save these types of things to NCM 360, I use it all the time. You can do that, but I would recommend that everybody, again, in light of these recent Supreme Court findings, that the executive can just do something and break the law, and we may not get an injunction from a lower court executive. I have no idea that they don't one day decide that some post that you made here on social media 5 years ago warrants your being picked up and arrested. I'm sorry. It's just, I don't think it's going to come to that. I really don't. But why take a chance? So I think everybody should have get your personal documentation in order to prove you're a citizen of this country. We have people right now who are citizens of the country who are being incarcerated. Maybe they have a name that is a foreign name. Maybe they have a name that is an Arabic name. On the way to work this morning, I heard about a man who has been detained for 9 days, incarcerated. He is a citizen of this country, and he was incarcerated at the Bush International Airport for 9 days and was just released. This was on NPR, the local NPR news. So I encourage everybody to do that. I think you should make sure your tax compliance is good. I have no idea if eventually the IRS is going to come to everybody and say, "We see you made $10,000 in payments to this person. They were not legal residents of this country, and you did not file a 1099 on them. You were liable for some tax effect." So I would make sure that you are in tax compliance. I would make sure that if you have social media posts that just don't need to be there, they don't get you anything, that maybe the time to remove them has arrived if it doesn't have any particular benefit for you. And I would be careful what you say on those sites. They are private businesses. They are not they're not public sites. And as we're seeing, the right to free speech is being tested all sorts of places. Level two, strategic charitable. I have increased my giving, especially to the ACLU. If I read where actions are being taken in court to to oppose actions that are impacting civil liberties, 9 times out of 10, the attorneys that are representing both liberal organizations but also conservative organizations. There are many conservative organizations who are concerned about civil liberties being trampled. Here's an article from just the other day, and well, it's too small to see, but the ACLU is performing so much of the representation, and so I'm giving more generously to the ACLU to make sure. I also recommend that everybody think about having personal legal counsel, not necessarily retained, but identified. Okay? If you're the person who comes back into the country and you're whatever they decide that you're going to spend 9 days at Bush, I think everyone should at least have had a conversation with somebody who's an attorney. In my case, it's probably my brother who's an attorney, and just have a conversation. Which is, if I give you a phone call, you're not going to hang up on me, and so that's level two. Level three, I've talked a lot about Swiss custody. Not mandatory. If it's something you're interested in, let us know. And then, of course, international residency and citizenship. We have some clients doing some of these level three activities. And again, my hope is that we're going to get kumbaya in this country. I hope we will, but we're a long way from it right now. We're financial advisors. We like to look at risk. Okay, we're going to turn to portfolios and bring JC back to help with this. Just to remind everybody, we have three sleeves, three buckets, if you will, in our portfolios. We have an equity bucket, we have a fixed income or bond bucket, and over the last year, we made a third bucket, which we call the tactical bucket. And the equity bucket is U.S., international, and real estate equity, broadly diversified, low cost, low turnover, low tax effects. Fixed income is government bonds, municipal bonds, corporate bonds, and agency bonds. Same thing, broadly diversified, low cost, low tax effects. And then we added this bucket as a place where we could do some things that we hope will help portfolios. We make no promises about it, but when we get ideas that we think or holdings that we think should be in the portfolio that are not included in these buckets, this is where they go. And right now, we've got only 3 holdings in it. Bitcoin, a holding there, Berkshire Hathaway, and then we recently added a holding in NVIDIA. And we can talk about that, but maybe people have questions. These are small holdings, this total bucket in our Model 10 might be 10% of the entire portfolio. In a Model 5, it would be 5% of the portfolio. But we're hoping that over the long term, it has the ability to give a little bit of extra special sauce to the portfolios. Okay. All right, JC. And now, I'm going the wrong way. Okay.
Okay. So we showed this chart in our last webinar for the first time, just to show you how broadly diversified you are within your stock portfolio. So with the holdings in our equity sleeve, you are getting access to investments over 50 countries and over 13,000 different companies. You can see majority is still held in North America, but it's been expanding over into other international companies as well. And we've actually increased that number since our last webinar. We added a little bit more into the international equity sleeve. And so that would have been reflected here in this chart. And the same thing on the next page for the bonds. It looks very similar. Majority, around 60% still held in North America, but you can see you're getting exposure to over 60 different countries and over 26,000 different holdings within your bond portfolio as well. So we just thought those are interesting, an interesting way to look at that. This is also an interesting chart here. What we're trying to show you is why we've been moving to ETFs over the past few years as they become available in the funds that we want to hold. So this is showing capital gains paid by the different investment vehicles, ETFs versus mutual funds, and then looking at the passive versus active ETFs and mutual funds. And you can see by and large, passive ETFs have produced the least amount of capital gains each year. I think there's a couple of years where maybe active ETFs had, the least amount, but by and large, passive ETFs have been the most tax efficient vehicles and where we're trying to go with most of our funds if we can. So with everything this past quarter, how did our portfolios perform? So just to remind everyone, we have 4 different variations or flavors of our model portfolios, 2 different global portfolios and 2 different US only portfolios. The global and US core, those would mean that they have the factor tilts toward a heavier allocation to the small and value companies. And then the market for the US and global would just be market cap weighted allocations. And so if you want to follow the market portfolios would be where you would want to be. And then the core would be if there is, based on historical data and returns, if there's any chance to outperform the market, we think it would be found in these portfolios, the core portfolios. And so you can see every model was positive this quarter, all the way from model 0, which would be a bond only portfolio producing 2% or so, all the way up to our model 10, which is all equity. So you can see the leader there would have been the global market portfolio, and that's around, I would say, 11.75% return over this quarter. So that's a very strong quarter for equities.
And the notable thing is that the global portfolios outperformed the U.S. only.
And
everybody can see here that the global portfolios, noticeably outperformed the U.S. only portfolios.
Yes. Yeah.
Whether it was bonds or whether it was stocks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then here we like to give some comparisons to some of our partners, BlackRock, Vanguard, and Dimensional. This is based on a 50% stock, 50% bond portfolio, our Model 5. And you can see that our portfolios, we inched out again, or the highest return here for this quarter is 6.99% return for this specific portfolio. BlackRock at 6.97, so just behind. Vanguard 6.25 and Dimensional at 5.81% return for this quarter based on this allocation.
But it's close. All these great worldwide, world famous managers, including New Capital Management, it's sort of like Major League Baseball, right? I mean, it's on any given day, any team can win. Our team won over this Q2, but not by a lot over BlackRock and by a little bit more over Vanguard and, pretty noticeably over Dimensional, but, they're all close. The world of building these portfolios is competitive, and it's not simple to outperform your competitors who are also our business partners.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. I'm going to talk about this one. Is that right? So where are valuations right now? I just wanted to talk about this. I talked before about the valuation on the S&P 500, which is a proxy for U.S. stocks. It's not all U.S. stocks. It's 500 out of about 3,000 stocks, but it's generally the largest ones. And everybody can see that the current valuation on U.S. stocks is toward the higher reaches, right? Toward the higher reaches of the 20-year range, right? So you can see that the current valuations and the January 1st valuation already uh, was bumping up against the 20-year range, the highest observation we'd seen over the last 20 years, and the 20-year average is right here. So well above the 20-year average for U.S. valuations. Let's contrast that with Japan, Europe, other emerging markets, excluding China. Other emerging markets might include Mexico or Brazil and China itself. All of these other areas, you see that they are trading around, and current is the purple, they are trading around, even after their strong performance, their 20-year average. Japan's actually below its 20-year average, where the U.S. is noticeably above it. So, in other words, the thesis that we've had for a while that international is just cheaper and maybe a better buy, with the prospect for higher returns because of the inexpensiveness of the securities, remains intact based upon current valuations. That's the idea here. Okay. So now, what does that mean for our portfolios?
So here we're showing you the breakdown between our US and international equity components. So right now we're sitting at a 55% US, 45% international allocation. We did reduce it, the US portion 5% over this past quarter. And so we are sitting kind of at the lowest US allocation compared to our partners. BlackRock still holding a very healthy 75% bias to the US. Vanguard around 60-40. Theirs stays pretty consistent at that 60-40. We're usually floating around there, but we did reduce it. Dimensional 72% US. And then ACWI, which is the kind of the all world benchmark, 65-35. So we do have, on the lower side for the US component, which I think is, which I know is what helped our returns over this quarter.
So the ACWI, the MSCI All Country World Index, is, if you want to think about this as the benchmark, is 65% US, 35% international. We're running 10% above, we're running 10% below, underweight the US, and 10% overweight international. That's how everyone might think about it. We're running 10% overweight, underweight US international, which means that we are more heavily weighted toward these less expensive segments of the international global stock market. And our hope is that it will result in higher returns as we go forward. Can't promise you that. Don't know what's going to happen, but that's the idea. A little bit less of this super expensive place. Okay. And so how has it worked out year to date?
So we're showing you our two funds that we use. The DFAC is our US fund ETF that we use, and DFAX being the international, the ex-US fund for equity or stock. And you can see right around February where they started to diverge with the international really starting to pull away from the US stock performance. They both obviously had the dip there early April with the tariff announcements. But since then, the recovery, there's been, quite a divergence there with international performing almost 20% year to date, and you right around just under 5%. So that's a 15% delta, which is pretty remarkable.
Enormous amount of outperformance. And so we're happy to report this to you because, we've had a lot of years where the U.S. outperformed international, but the worm turned here this year, Q1, Q2. Can't tell you it's going to continue, right? We can't make those promises. But that's why I showed you all the slide on valuation. So you see that the thesis that this inexpensive area is still still relatively inexpensive. And then number two, we want you to be diversified, including against any further depreciation of the US dollar. You all may have questions about the US dollar, but this diversification gives us diversification of the US dollar because these foreign companies, many of which are some of the best companies in the world, are earning their profits in foreign currencies. Okay? All right. Now, so what have we done lately, Ms. Smalley?
Oh, you're asking me.
Yeah.
So we have added four new international bonds, three of which were unhedged to the US dollar. And we'll show you what the performance on those have looked like year to date. And so that's just, we're working to try to, if there continues to be weakening in the US dollar, we think those will have favorable performance. We don't know that we will, but we've added a little allocation to them just in case that there is. And we've also added a little piece of NVIDIA to the portfolios. And I think we did that, Leonard, you have to remind me, was it a month or two ago? I think
It's been a few weeks.
okay. So it's now a third, or we're moving towards making it a third of our tactical sleeve. And we just think that, it's still early days in the AI world, and NVIDIA is just continuing to be the strongest leader in that industry with their chip design, with their leadership. And so we think in the long term, this is going to have it would be a good play.
Yeah. There are a lot of large language models. Actually, I have on my desk a technical guide for creating large language models, and it's pretty heavy duty going. Um, um, but there are a lot of large language models getting produced, right? OpenAI has ChatGPT, and Google has Gemini, and Anthropic has Claude, and Microsoft, I think, is going to make their own. I mean, there's thousands of them now, and they're getting made all over the world. And China has this DeepSeek, but they all generally are getting processed. Not in all cases, but they're all of that processing is having to go through NVIDIA GPUs, processors. So that's sort of the common thing. We don't really care who the software is. They're all having to get crunched on NVIDIA processors. Although NVIDIA has competition in the form of AMD and Broadcom, but they are the clear leader in this area, and they have been extending their lead. They control a very important layer of the technology stack called CUDA, CUDA, and it's essentially a software layer that runs on top of their processors. And so it's already the most valuable company in the world. It passed $4 trillion in valuation, but in many ways, we may see its valuation. I don't know. It could double, it could triple. It's an enormously profitable business. I wanted to buy more of it back when things tanked in April, but the market responded too fast at the lows. I talked about how quickly, just like it was in COVID, it went back, and we didn't like that. Anyway, but we have it in portfolios now. We may add some more. Now, this is looking at the issue of the unhedged international bonds, just to give everybody a flavor, JC, of what the difference in performance between international bonds that are not hedged to the dollar have done this year with the depreciation of the US dollar, which has depreciated about 10%,
Yeah.
versus major foreign currencies like the euro or the yen. So take us through this slide so people can see why we have added these four holdings to the portfolio: LENB, CEMB, GHYG, and ISHG.
Yes. So our four new funds that Leonard just named off, we did market here against the AG, which is the diversified core U.S. bond fund, that one of them that we use, but it's a good benchmark. And that is shown in this chart in the bottom of the dark blue, with a 2.86% return year to date, and that's including dividends in that return figure there.
Not bad, not bad. I mean, that means you're making 5 point something 6% on an annual basis, right? And
Sure.
years ago, when there were no interest rates, and you got 1% for holding bonds, any bond, Now people have gotten greedy. 2.86%, 5.6, 5% a year, So look, there's nothing wrong with 2.86% through the first half of the year on a highly diversified bond portfolio. So I just wanted to throw that in.
And then compare that to the first green one there. This is an international, that is the CEMB. So that is corporate emerging debt bonds, 4.32%. That one is unhedged, but it is corporate. So could be the reason why it hasn't, gone up as much as the government unhedged emerging bond funds, which is
this red one.
In the red, yes.
11.2%. So these are emerging market bonds. These are emerging market bonds, a 7% differential. The difference is these are government bonds and these are corporate bonds. And so the likelihood is that companies were hurt by the tariff announcements where governments weren't.
Yeah. But still 4.32 year to date is
nothing to sneeze at.
Not at all. And then the last one there, the blue is GHYG. That is a high yield. That one is hedged back to the dollar. So that's why it's probably been trimmed back from the 11% you're seeing in the other two funds.
Yeah. Now this one, you didn't touch on this purple, the one that's at the very top. That's ISHG, which is international bonds that are, well, go ahead, you tell them.
That was the 1 to 3. I think it's the 1 to 3 year Treasury international bonds. So
international treasuries in developed markets. So it's basically like IAGG but unhedged.
Right. Yeah.
So German government, British government, etc., but unhedged. So that's why we've added to the portfolio so that you get some reduced exposure to the dollar. Okay, so this explains to everybody why we have added those and what they might do to the portfolio. Okay, here's NVIDIA year to date.
So year to date, you see there was the dip there in April, but overall year to date, a 27%, return.
Yeah, as the AI revolution continues, and so we'll see. We never make any promises. We're not going to make them here, but we want you to know why we're positioning portfolios the way they are. All right, I'm going to wrap up here, and then we'll leave room for some questions. I'm sorry we're over, although I don't think we're over. We generally run about this. Risks ahead. I think the firing of Jerome Powell is going to happen. I just can't tell you what the reaction is going to be of markets or judges or the Supreme Court or legislatures, but I would be shocked if Jerome Powell was not fired by the President of the United States and how that's going to go. And I think that's a big risk. It's one thing to fire the head of USAID. It's another thing to fire the chairman of the Federal Reserve, who I will remind everybody, Donald Trump himself appointed during his first term. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, I think, has a 10-year term and can only be fired for cause. And so we will see what cause is determined to be the cause, but I think Jerome Powell is going to get fired. Big tariffs, are scheduled to go into effect on August 1st. Can't tell you what's going to happen. I can only tell you that the markets know about these things. The markets know about the growing impasse with Jerome Powell by the president. The markets know about the tariffs, and it's in the prices in markets. Do we have an reemergence of inflation as the tariffs begin to hit? We already have tariffs, everybody. We've already got 10% that's gone in on stuff. So we already have tariffs that would have been unthinkable years ago. So I don't want anybody to think we don't have tariffs. We've got them, and they're here. But we haven't yet begun to see fully whether those tariffs are trickling through into higher prices in the economy. There's some evidence that companies are eating some of the tariffs right now. I think Goldman Sachs did a breakdown and determined that maybe consumers are paying half of the cost of the tariff and companies are deciding to pay the other half of the tariff. So we haven't seen the full trickle through effect of inflation. But we did get a report yesterday that we have a little bit higher inflation, and everybody is using that report to prove up their points. The administration is saying, "See, it's not so bad," and others are saying, "Well, we're starting to see the tip of the inflation iceberg." And of course, all this goes to the heart of the standoff with the Federal Reserve, where the Federal Reserve is tasked with keeping inflation low and is wary of seeing inflation take off again. So we have risks here. I talked about obstacles to growth. Uh, if we dismantle the clean energy efforts, if we shut down immigration, if we incarcerate 10 million people or 1 million people or however many people who are actually working and they're no longer working, and we're employing jailers rather than cleaners and cooks and so on, what does that mean for growth? And then if we put on tariffs and foreign nations are no longer purchasing goods and services from the United States, what does that mean? And then what I've called the unknowns. What are all the things that just unknown that could happen that we can't even speculate about? Which in the second Trump presidency, I think everybody just takes for granted that we can wake up any day and some um, earth-shaking unknown could occur, whether it happens because or whether it happens coming out of our government, or it's something that the Chinese government does, or the Russian government, or something that happens somewhere that comes completely out of left field that we don't know about. Um, and it just feels as if those risks, given this president and his administration, that those risks are more present than they've been in the past. So that's the last slide. We'll take questions. Thank you all very much for being with us today, and thank you to my colleagues who are amazing, amazing. JC, thank you. Catherine, thank you. Daisy and Casey, who's not on the call, but so we'll take some questions, Catherine, if there are any. There may not be.
Yeah, we've got two in so far. And of course, if you have any other questions that you think of, feel free to type them in while we're answering these. The first one is, what percent of clients are in each model level portfolio?
Well, that's a really good question. It probably looks like a bell curve, but we could say that Model 6 is going to be the most common. That's not unusual. A 60/40 portfolio is often a very common portfolio in investment management, where you hold 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds. We have quite a lot of people who are a little bit more aggressive than that in a 70/30. We've got people who are 80/20, very few who are 100% stocks, but there are some. And then we've got quite a number of people who are 50/50, and some who are less aggressive, 40% stocks and 30% stocks, maybe 20% stocks. I don't think we've got anybody who's 10% stocks and 0% stocks. Have I said it accurately, JC? But it's a really good question. And you know what we ought to do for maybe our next webinar is we'll give that slide. I think that's a good slide to show.
Yeah. And within each household, we can apply the models to any given account. So
we have some people where a particular account they have, maybe they're going to use the money soon to do something with it. We might give them a different model for that particular account, for that particular purpose. So there's all kind of reasons why somebody might be in a particular model. Other questions?
Yes, next one is it ethically problematic to prioritize the environment while investing in Bitcoin and NVIDIA?
Um, um, could you read it again? Is it ethically
Problematic to prioritize the environment while investing in Bitcoin and NVIDIA?
um it's a really good question. I don't know that anything, I mean, I don't know that anything we do is environmental. I don't know if me going to work today is environmental. I try to do the best I can. The world has ways to produce energy that are clean. I was just in the Pacific Northwest. It has very bountiful amount of hydroelectric power coming from the Columbia River Basin. And uh, we have the ability to produce solar power now, and we have the ability to produce wind power. So we have the ability to power humanity in much cleaner ways. Um, I wish that we would do that. I wish we would power NVIDIA chips through those clean energy sources more than not. I wish that we would power, if it's Bitcoin mining, that we would power it through those clean sources. But I don't have any control of that any more than I have control over how I power my house. Although I can make choices and I can sign up for clean energy plans, and I do. So I'm not conflicted about it. The choices that our society makes about how to power ourselves, those choices are made far beyond my ability and my influence. I'm a voter, and I did vote differently than what wound up being the choice that the majority of people in this country made who voted. Um, but I can't operate client portfolios because Americans made that choice. I am glad that the people of China are making a different choice. They are moving quickly to green energy. They are leading the world in and we have you invested with some Chinese companies. And China is going to lead the world in clean energy. I wish it was my country, but my country has made a different choice, and I'm sorry about that. But I'm a fiduciary. We have to arrange client portfolios based upon reality, not based upon fantasy. And if you have a data center, they have choices that they can make about what they're going to do. There are now talks about data centers being powered by nuclear energy. There are discussions between Google and nuclear power producers and Microsoft and nuclear power producers to power data centers. So that's all happening at a level that we don't have any control of. We do have portfolios that offer and are sustainable portfolios, which we didn't mention, but this gives us an excellent opportunity. We do have environmental, social, governance, ESG portfolios that represent a 99% reduction in carbon emissions. And so that's how we answer that. If you want to hold a portfolio, and we don't already hold it for you, but if you want it, we will give you a portfolio that at least is represented to us to represent a 99% reduction in carbon emissions. That's the only way we can do it in our little world of managing your money. I hope that answers the question. I really appreciate the question. It's an excellent, excellent question. I wake up every day, worried about the world, but I can only do so many things, especially when my fellow neighbors vote a different way. Okay, next question.
Okay, next question is now a bad time to invest in real estate or purchase new property? It seems like many markets are still overvalued.
Well, there are a lot of different real estate markets. Maybe the questioner could be specific. If it's is it resident? It may be residential real estate that's being asked about purchasing a home, uh, and um, and if that is what's being asked about, it completely depends upon the place that you're buying and the individual neighborhood and so on. I think that home prices may have moderated a little bit, and they are showing some um, some signs of slowing. But I know that doesn't make them cheap, and certainly very far from distressed. And so I would simply say that you need to be careful, and that I would view the purchase of any residential real estate not as an investment. And we always say this. We don't ever think you should buy a house, whether it's a primary home or a vacation property, as an investment. We just don't think they're good. They may turn out to be a good investment, but we don't think going in they should be looked at as an investment. We think a lot of people underestimate the carrying costs of taxes and maintenance and furnishings. And when you add all that up, And at the end of the day, nobody, when they sell the house, does an honest accounting of did they actually make money. Imagine if the investments we made for you in stocks and bonds and funds, every year we came to you and said, "Hey, it's the end of the year. We need you to pay us additional money for taxes and insurance and maintenance and so on." You'd be like, "I don't want that investment." So, now commercial real estate is completely a different question because that's income generating property, and we invest you in commercial real estate. And we like it. We like commercial real estate, and we buy you commercial real estate all over the world in all kinds of different sectors of the real estate business, warehousing and apartments, and even cell towers and retail stores and office buildings and so on. And so we think that that's an important part in your portfolio. And so we hold for you an allocation. It's not a huge allocation. It's maybe 3, 4, 5% of the portfolio. But we like commercial real estate as a holding in the portfolio. Hope that answers that question.
And then one other came through chat. It says,
All right.
is an even heavier AI portfolio a good option for certain clients?
It's a good question. AI, the problem is that AI is everywhere. It's going into every business. It's going into everything. And so, if you own Exxon, I assure you, is using AI for energy exploration and so on. Um, and that was that slide I showed. Industries are adopting AI. AI is everywhere, and so to specific and AI is increasingly becoming the dominant. And I would say it's already there. It is already the dominant um, um, constituent in the technology business. If you're a software company, if you're a semiconductor company, if you're a network company, all these companies are involved in AI, and in many cases, it has become the main thing they're doing. And so, your portfolio has benefited from it as the tech sector has had a boost, and you have benefited by getting positive returns from the technology allocation in the portfolio. So the question is, should it be overweighted anymore? Well, we said, yeah, we think a little bit of an overweight is in store, and we want to give what we think is the best way to do it, which is the company whose chips all the AI searches and large language models is coursing through the chips that they're making, and that's NVIDIA. So we have had a client or two who's been interested in a particular AI fund. We're happy to do that. If you're interested in that, we're happy to, take a look at that. Um, we've looked at those funds, but they'll hold something like, I don't know, FedEx or something. Is FedEx an AI company? Or they'll hold something like I don't know, JC. I'm sort of searching for what might be there. But when something is as big as AI is, it becomes built into all portfolios because all companies are adopting it, right? And so it's kind of like if you go back to the 1960s, is it worth it to hold more computers, more IBM in your portfolio back in 1965? Well, maybe, but if IBM gets too expensive, it can work against it. So it's an excellent question. We get it pretty regularly. But we always want to be careful because there's a lot that's being marketed as AI also, and it's just a diversified technology fund. What makes it better than whatever, Fidelity Contra Fund or just a technology sector fund? So we want to be careful. When something takes off and becomes a fad, it just starts getting marketed all over the place. And so we haven't seen fit because we think the portfolio and the performance of the portfolio is in line with what's going on. So the way we've decided, as I said, to do it is just we're going to give you some NVIDIA, although you already have lots of NVIDIA and you have Microsoft and you have Google and you have more NVIDIA and you have Apple and you have Broadcom. You have all those things in your portfolio already. They are the largest holdings in your equity portfolio because they've become the most valuable companies. They're there already. So you're not missing out on the AI revolution by any means. Don't want you to think that's the case just because we don't have something labeled in the portfolio as AI. It's there. You're getting AI in your portfolio every day, including from international companies, as AI has gone international and as countries regard having their own primacy and their own internal national AI developments, they regard those as being important to their national security. AI has gone international, and so we think that's important too. Any other questions? Great questions. These are great questions. Any others?
There was a follow-up to that one
All right.
that was a little bit just more specific. It said, what about pharmaceutical AI, recursion, or logistics AI? Any thoughts?
Again, if you give me a company that's doing this or companies, more than likely it's in your portfolio. You own it. You own what was that slide that we showed? Let me see about going back to it.
The map?
The map here. I mean, here,
One more, go.
here, there, 13,000 companies. You'd be hard pressed to come up with, I mean, so if the questioner gives me a few companies that they're interested in, we'll see if it's in the portfolio. With 13,000 companies in 51 countries, more than likely you own it. So and if you don't own it, the question is how much do we put into the portfolio? What's the risk there? How new is it? What's the price? You get into all sorts of questions. When we buy NVIDIA or Berkshire, when we buy a direct holding in the portfolio of an individual stock, we really want to be sure. Let's just think if we've got a client, and we do have clients with $10 million portfolios, and we put a 3% position of something in NVIDIA, let's just say, well, that's a $300,000 position in NVIDIA. Did I do my math right, JC?
Say that again. Sorry, I
A
was
$10 million portfolio, 3% of a $10 million portfolio is a $300,000 position, right?
Yes.
So I have to be able to explain to a client why I just bought $300,000 worth of an individual stock.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the acid test. We have to think very carefully. Do we trust this management? Do we trust this business? Do we trust this company if we're going to buy $300,000 worth of it? Okay. Yeah. JC, you were going to.
I was just already looking up this recursion company is already in DFAC, so you already do own it.
You own it already. It's in there. It's a great question though. So you see that the diversification we're giving you is not only to avoid tariff problems, going back to this slide right here, right? Utilities not impacted by tariffs, and real estate not impacted by tariffs. Financials, sorry, they are impacted, but relatively less than technology. So diversification in the case of this slide is intended to avoid risk or reduce risk rather, right? But it's not only that diversification reduces risk, that it increases return because it gives us exposure to the type of company that you're asking about, this recursive super whiz bang thing that it's doing in pharmaceutical AI. It's in the portfolio. So we're giving you access to that source of return. So diversification always has two sides of a coin. One side of it is to reduce risk. The other side of it is to enhance return. But most often people think about diversification from the risk reduction standpoint. But we want to be clear. That recursive company is in the portfolio. You own it. And if you think it's going to do great things, then it's doing great things. Now, should you hold it in a bigger proportion in your portfolio? That's a question for another day and another conversation. There are finance academics who would say, why do you think you know more about the value of that company than the market? The market is already valuing it given its prospects. If the prospects for that pharmaceutical company called Recursive are so incredible and earth-shaking, groundbreaking, why isn't it valued like NVIDIA? You know? Why isn't it bigger? If it's the greatest thing ever, it should be the biggest company. So academics involved in finance would say the market weighting of that company is the correct weighting in the portfolio. But you'll have lots of arguments about that one. Any other questions?
That is it as of right now.
It's great to have everybody. Thank you so much for being on our webinar today and joining us. And I'm sorry that we are coming up on almost 2 hours, but we had a lot to say. I think you can forgive us that, given what's going on, all the things going on in the world. We are grateful for your trust. We know that it can just be a nerve-wracking time, and we want everybody to find all the peaceful things in your life and happy things. And we hope that we are a source of that. We want to be a source of that and a source of stability for you. And so we hope we're doing that. By the way, if you know anybody, we're still growing. We're moving toward $500 million under management, but we are able to take care of more people. If you have loved ones, whether that's friends or family or other people, let them know about us. We are enhancing our marketing efforts, but still the number one way that we add our clients is by you telling people about us. And so we'll certainly appreciate that. Our next event will be the annual conference, and we hope that you will join us for that, whether that's in person, which we would love, or whether you're not able to do that and will join us through Zoom. We do a pretty good job of that. Catherine, thank you for putting it together today, as you always do. It's so great. And JC, thank you for helping me so much to make these slides and to give our clients some insight into where things are. And if there are any questions or follow-ups that you have, whether that's questions or concerns or ideas or worries or whatever it may be, please, please, please do not hesitate to ask us. The worst thing is when you have questions and feel like you didn't ask us or couldn't ask us or whatever, the webinar ended and we didn't get to it or whatnot. Please send us an email and we will turn to that. And we wish you a great rest of the week and a great rest of the summer, and hope everything is going well in your life. Thank you so much.